people to get the book. It's just that, trying to explain the whole thing in its entirety would take the next hour up and beyond. So, but I will say this, that my mother was involved. My mother was also taken in this incident, and I saw them very clearly, the Greys. And there was one in particular who I mentioned in the book, but this one particularly under hypnosis bothered me a lot more than he did when I first saw him. And to be very honest with you, I wondered, and I'm not the for sure person on.
There is a place where fears and fantasies get weighed with substance alone. Legends and lores are examined with fresh light. Conspiracy theory meets conspiracy fact. Abandon your defenses. Embrace the possibilities. Step beyond the threshold into other realms.
I was laying there ready to fall asleep, and I felt a pulse. They can choose whatever they want. About 3 feet tall.
UFO activity.
And it remembers everything that ever happened. And then there was one point where I heard a growl. Some UFOs when we were there.
I want to know the truth.
You're listening to Thresholds in Other Realms. I'm Anthony K. With me is Sam Maranto and John Stevenson. We are live at the Orland Park Library in Orland Park, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, at the MUFON conference. We put together quite a good show for you tonight. We have Richard Dolan. He's going to be speaking. We have a couple other good speakers and witnesses as well, so stay tuned. You're listening to Thresholds. We'll start off right away with one of our witnesses right after this quick commercial break.
TheEdgeOnAir.com and Thresholds into Other Realms present Thresholds Radio, a weekly show dedicated to all things paranormal. Join your hosts Sam Maranto, John Stevenson, and Anthony Kopp Fridays from 10 to 11 p.m. for an expedition beyond your most unexplainable dreams. With new guests every week, Thresholds Radio will bend your views on reality. That's Friday nights 10 to 11 on TheEdgeOnAir.com. For more info on Thresholds Radio, visit UFO-info.com.
You're listening to Thresholds in Other Realms. I'm Anthony K. With me is Sam Maranto and John Stevenson, and we are live at the Orland Park Library, just outside of Chicago in Orland Park, Illinois. And right now, John Stevenson is going to interview a gentleman by the name of...
Ross Curley.
Ross Curley. Okay, take it away, John.
How are you doing today, Ross?
I'm doing just fine, John. Thank you.
What story did you want to share with us?
I want to share with you my experience of last November, I believe it was 14th or 16th.
That was the one where you filed the MUFON report?
That was where I filed, yes. It was a November evening around 6 o'clock. For November, it was quite warm out, and we have bird feeders outside, and we have a problem with raccoons that come at night and tear everything up. So I was outside bringing the feeders in, and also we're 50 miles northwest of Chicago O'Hare Airport, and we're under one of the flight paths. So sometimes around that time at night, they have the commuter jets coming in, and every once in a while, one of the big ocean ones come in, the big jumbo jets. And when they're coming in, on the back of them, on the back of the wingtips, they have these gold lights, amber lights like. And I like to watch them as they're coming in over the house. How high up they are at 50 miles from O'Hare, how fast they're going, I have no idea. But they're just kind of going in. So I'm watching this one, and all of a sudden I look up, and I see this thing. Now as I think more about it, it was like a baseball-sized globe. And it was above and beyond, and behind the aircraft, and I'm thinking, wow, that thing's pretty close for the 3 miles that they're supposed to be apart.
Is it actually following the aircraft?
It's following the aircraft, going at the same speed, and I just watched it until the plane disappeared, and I could still see the globe going. So I think it was the following Saturday I came to a MUFON meeting here in Orland Park, and I was telling Sam about it. And Sam says, well, did you report it to MUFON? I said, no. He says, well, do it because somebody in Joliet saw the same thing. So then I filed the report with MUFON, and about a month later, a gentleman named Des.
Who just happens to be right here.
Good evening, folks.
Who emailed me and wanted to do a live interview with me in regards to my sighting, and Des and I talked about it.
Was Des very professional?
Yes, he was. Very nice gentleman.
Okay.
I paid him well to say that.
Also, I have a first experience with seeing a UFO up close, which was in the mid-'50s when I was about 14 years old. On the north side of Diversey Harbor in Chicago. It was at night. A friend and I were down in the park doing some type of mischief. And we looked up, and we were looking south. To our left is Lakeshore Drive and then Lake Michigan. And these 3 or 4 lights come in over top of us. We couldn't really tell the shape. There was no sound, and this big lighted something or other went over our head, went south toward Chicago, downtown, and then just disappeared. We still don't know what it was to this day. It was almost like I could touch it. But it was,
and it made no noise.
No noise at all. At that time, we didn't have news helicopters and police helicopters.
Yeah. But generally something sky made
something,
noise. So.
Right, correct. And I've seen other things since then, but that's...
It's interesting. Did you want to ask him something? You said that?
Yeah, those lights you saw, you say you saw multiple lights?
The lights on the craft were multiple, yes.
Yeah, do you think they were connected to a solid body, or were they independent?
I think they
lights?
were connected to a solid body, yes.
Okay. Was it it was at night?
It was at night, correct.
Could you see through
Not
that
that
object?
I remember,
Did
no.
it kind of obscure the sky?
You couldn't see the sky or anything, just the lights.
Okay.
I believe they were red and green. It's hard, it's...
Could you see the actual sky, or was that just blocking the sky?
You couldn't see the actual sky from it, no.
Okay. What kind of altitude do you think that was?
I would say a couple 100 feet.
And got any estimation on the speed it was traveling?
Maybe 20 miles an hour, maybe.
Okay,
it was very
so
slow.
It was
just,
quite slow,
just
yeah.
Floating, like a balloon. But it wasn't a balloon.
How long was the sighting for? How long did you see it for?
For a couple of minutes. Long enough for it to go from... You know Belmont Harbor, John, I'm pretty sure. Not Belmont, but Diversey Harbor, and just for it to just flow towards downtown, which is about maybe 2 miles from there, maybe less.
Anybody else see it with you? Were you around?
My friend saw it, but I'm still in contact with him.
He disappeared, right?
No, I know where he's at, and I've had contact with him, but he's not into the UFO thing anymore. Or ever was, I don't believe.
You say you saw some other stuff since then?
Last year I've seen many strange things in the sky coming over McHenry. One night I was sitting on my deck, and I look out toward the north. I got my binoculars going, and I'm looking and watching all the strange stuff flying around up there. And to my left, I go, wow, here comes one of them little, Piper Cubs or something coming out of the clouds because it lit up the clouds. That's how low this thing was. And as it crossed in front of me, it was like looking at that clock up there. That's how big it was. This big white light. It just went across in front of me, came out of the clouds. There's a blue spot. It was just like a big white orb. Then it went back in the clouds, and I wanted to go and tell my wife, what I'm looking at, and I just stood there and watched it going east until it got out of sight. But it's pretty amazing out there. What you can see at night.
All you got to do is look up, really.
All I got to do is look up, and there they are.
A little patience, look up, and that's it.
Another time I had my binoculars on, I'm looking toward the northeast, and I could see this white light goes by. About 10 seconds later, another one in the same path. 3 of them within a 30-second period went through the same path, so I know they're not satellites.
You got a video camera?
I just got a video camera, so hope to get
Put it
something
on a
this
tripod
year.
And take it outside those nice nights.
Right, if it ever stops raining.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else, Des?
No, I can't think of anything else right now.
Kind of like living in London, I guess.
Yeah, that's an amazing video, isn't it?
Oh, that video. Yes, that video was pretty cool.
I do. I'm a photo analyst for Mars Anomaly Research Society. I work with Andrew D. Bashago, founder of the group, And our chairman of the board is Alfred Lamont Weber, the father of exopolitics out of British Columbia. And what I do is I examine rover images that they send back to Earth, and then you can go on the rover NASA JPL site and view the images that they send back.
Look at the great edited images that NASA sends
Correct.
out.
And then what we do is we try and find what NASA hides.
Actually, it's not hard to find what they hide because the editing job is so bad with them normally.
Correct. But they say there's nothing there but rocks.
I'd like to ask you, you said there was 3 of you when you saw the craft? 3 of your friends? Was it you? And
myself, no, just 2 of us. Myself and my friend, yes.
Okay, and he recalled the exact same thing you did?
He, at one time he would, but at this time I can't say why he won't talk about it now.
Okay, because in my experience, the person that I was with has no recollection the next day. He even claimed he wasn't even with me at all. So I was just wondering if he had remembered anything.
Well, he was also in the Navy. He had 25 plus years in the Navy, and he mentioned to me in a few emails that he saw many strange things out in the middle of the ocean at night. Okay, so it's not that he won't talk about it. It's just his religious beliefs right now, where he won't discuss it.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Hey, I do have a quick question. Just a quick question. Part of the Mars anomaly research that you're doing, there's a website, and I went to it. It's pretty amazing. There's a lot of stuff on there. Can you remember what that website is off the top of your head?
Do you know what he's thinking?
You mean the one that I steered you to?
Yes.
That was Mars Anomaly Research Society.
Okay. So anybody could just Google that.
Anybody could go there. Go to actually, you go to www.projectmars.net.
Okay.
Yeah, .net.
All right. Yeah, I went there, and there's some pretty eye-opening stuff on there, I tell you.
Right. When you go in, you get on their homepage and you go to the Annals of Mars. You go in there, and there's like 100 different files in there, and I have about maybe 8 or 10 discoveries of life and structure on Mars.
That's cool.
Some of the stuff there is very obvious. Other things you got to
some
really
is obvious,
look at.
and some is really hard to. After years of viewing thousands of images, they just pop out at you now. It'd be like going.
I just think it's ridiculous the way NASA tries to hide that. That is such a pitiful attempt. I could photo edit better than that. I could photo edit where you wouldn't know it was there. They don't even try.
Now Google also hides things. You know, on Google Earth. I found around the first part of the year, or actually when in California when they had that weird rocket launch.
Yeah.
Nobody could tell what it was. A friend of mine that lives in Laguna Beach told me that he saw it going up to the northwest of Catalina Island. So with my examinations and research that I do on Google, you can actually go underwater on Google. And you can see the caverns and the mountains and everything. You can't see fish or boats or sunken treasure. Or anything. So I go under the water with my computer, and I'm down there and I'm looking around the northwest side of Catalina Island, and I find this big, gigantic cave.
I actually saw that picture you posted.
It measured 1,200 by 600 feet. It's a huge cave. So we put it up on Facebook and we talked about it. And a friend of mine in California says, Ross Curley found this huge cave, blah, 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 blah. So this was, I think, in January. So my friend in California just recently went back there to do another article on it, and Google had taken it and blurred the whole thing. You can't see, everything is gone. So there must actually be something there.
Has anybody ever gone there yet that you know of?
No. This is you have these other islands around there, and they're all military, naval owned. Oh. So I'm sure that I don't have the. I think it was like at 10,000 feet or something like that. Where you can't actually go. You need one of those deep diving rovers to go down there.
Google does it.
But Google does hide stuff.
Well, Google Space does too. You'll look up there, and sometimes there's a black square,
right,
which isn't natural in the sky.
Right. But a lot of people don't believe in. You go back to the Mars research that there's nothing there, but there is something there. I believe.
I'm surprised they even admit Mars is there. They hide so much.
I'm just surprised they haven't come and taken me away.
Okay, Ross. Well, nice talking to you. We've got to get going.
Well, thank
here.
you, John.
And Ross is our favorite Facebook fan, too.
That be me?
Okay, Ross Curley, everybody. We'll be right back. You're listening to Thresholds, Know the Realms, live at the MUFON meeting in Orland Park Library in Orland Park, Illinois. We'll be right back.
TheEdgeOnAir.com and Thresholds into Other Realms present Thresholds Radio, a weekly show dedicated to all things paranormal. Join your hosts Sam Maranto, John Stevenson, and Anthony Kopp Fridays from 10 to 11 p.m. for an expedition beyond your most unexplainable dreams. With new guests every week, Thresholds Radio will bend your views on reality. That's Friday nights 10 to 11 on TheEdgeOnAir.com. For more info on Thresholds Radio, visit UFO-info.com.
Welcome back to Thresholds into Other Realms, and today, of course, we are at the Orland Park Library with witnesses pertaining to their own experiences in dealing with unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs, and other things that go bump in the night. And with us now is whom? Kathleen. And Kathleen had an experience years ago, or well, I shouldn't say years ago, but some years ago. Yeah, okay. Who's kidding who, right? Yeah. Once you get past, what are you, past 17 now? Who's kidding who, right? Okay.
I wish.
Well, if you don't mind, first of all, do you have an idea what year this was?
Yeah, 1965.
1965, and you were a girl of about how old?
10.
10 years old.
Yeah.
And again, this took place where at?
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis?
Mm-hmm.
In a rural community? What type of community was it?
It wasn't like in the downtown area, but it was in Indianapolis, but outside the downtown area. It was a neighborhood, wasn't rural.
So it was an urban area for the most part?
Yeah.
Suburb type scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. And what time of the day was this?
Well, this was in the evening. It was the sun was getting ready to set. And the sun was still up. I mean, it wasn't all the way down, but it was still up. That it was still light out. But I had to get home.
And where were you?
What do you mean? Where was I?
Were you on the street? Were you on the sidewalk? Were you stealing hubcaps? What was going on here, girl?
No, I was actually on 35th Street. I was walking towards my house, which was on 35th Street. I was walking west.
Okay.
And we have kind of like Chicago's city street names, LaSalle. I lived in between LaSalle and Dearborn. And Dearborn was kind of like a half a street. So it was maybe 5 houses in between LaSalle and Dearborn. So I lived on the south side.
Okay. And what was it that happened? What was it that caught your eye?
I was walking down the street heading for home, and I was looking up, and on the corner, on the southwest side of the corner of Dearborn, was an apartment, but it was one of those ranch L-shaped apartments, and there was this huge tree in the center of it. And I was glancing up the tree, and I noticed something shining, like the sun was shining off of something like metal. And it was just still, but it was a distance away, but it was just standing still there, up in the air. And I'm looking at it because I'm like, what is that? I'd never seen anything. So, of course, as a kid, you're going through, is this a balloon or is it, what is it? And so I stood there watching. And my brother, who was watching me, because my parents and my little brother were gone, and he was, yelling, screaming at me, because this fits into the story here, yelling, screaming to come in, and I told him, wait, I'll be in. And he kept harassing me for a while, and I still stood there in front of my house, right at the street, watching this. And can't tell you how long I had been standing there, but I'm standing there, and then I see it move from behind the tree. It went straight into the middle of the road of 35th Street, but down, far down.
So it's a distance away. It moves over
Right.
from the tree.
From behind the tree.
And
yeah.
is it still indistinguishable, or is it starting to get larger?
No,
What's going on here?
It turned out it looked like it was metal. The sun that had been shining on it, and I could see that it was kind of round, and I could see it from a distance. It had some kind of, like, I call it a skirt, but it was like a rim. But it was far, And I'm watching it because it moved away from the tree into the middle of the street slowly. So I'm standing there watching it, and as the sun was coming down, it started to zigzag motion from left to right, but moving away from me. Okay, so it's moving away from me, darting back and forth. Then I'm watching it, still standing there watching it as the sun is coming down, and then the sun has almost disappeared, and I can see it zigzagging back towards me. And as it was coming towards me, I got my brother was still calling me every once in a while to come in, and I wouldn't go in because I was watching this thing. And I ran across the street. Now, across the street is 3 houses, but they sit below the street line, and there's woods behind. And in front of Dearborn, which ended right at 35th Street, it's a big field, but it was like a gravel and dirt. It's like they stopped building houses, and they just left this big lot empty. And behind it's all woods, and there's a house on the northwest corner, so it's right next to the lot. And I ran across the street to the middle house, because there was only 3 houses, to the middle house where this guy named Donald, he was 14, so he was 4 years older than me. And I went to get him out. I said, you got to come and see this. So while he was getting ready, I ran out of his house, and just in time to see it coming west, down the street, coming west.
Going west or coming from the west?
Going east.
Okay, coming from the west.
Above the street.
Now, is it above the roof line?
It's above the roof line. Okay. And it came, and then it made a turn as it was coming down the street. It made a left-hand turn and went right into the lot, and so above the roof line, and just above the roof line in the empty lot. And I'm watching it, and he came out, so we're watching it together. Do you want me to describe it, or?
Yes, give a description.
Okay.
You said it's somewhat round, so you say there's a skirt on it. There's
and the craft itself was not shiny. It was like a brush metal, okay? And it was a rectangle. It's like rectangle metal with rivets, but it was like it was slapped together with no rhyme or rhyme to it, It was just slapped together. It had antennas of small, medium, and large on top, and some smaller ones on the bottom. It had 3 huge picture windows in the front. So they went one facing my way. There was a big one in the front, and there was one on the side.
What shape were those?
They went along with the shape, so they were kind of curved.
No, but were they square? Were they round, like portals?
They were like you would see in a house, big picture
square
window, like
or
a
rectangular. Okay.
Square.
Square.
Big,
okay.
and they went around. The skirt itself was shiny. It was a shiny chrome looking, but it didn't come straight out like that. It was bent. So the top part, it came just below the window, so the top part of it was larger. Bottom part under the rim was smaller. Okay. And it had a door, but the door was shaped like the craft was shaped. So it was shaped like kind of oval on the top, kind of roundish on the top, but it followed and came down. And it had a small window on the side that had the shiny chrome on it. And you could see then inside by where the door is. You could see inside it was like kind of a cream color with a brown streaks in it, in the wall itself. And that was lit up, kind of like a dull white and dull light.
How far away were you, would you say, or you have any idea?
I could be no more than maybe a house.
So say 50 feet, 60 feet, something
yeah,
like
something like that, maybe
and you're
a little
getting
further.
a real good idea, and this object is just sitting there?
Yeah.
In the sky,
not a
hovering.
sound, just
not
hovering,
a sound.
not a sound, nothing.
Was it at an angle? Was it flat? Were you getting one perspective, multiple perspectives?
The only way, how you could tell it was round was not only on top and on the bottom, but the 3 picture windows was curved along with the...
Now, when you looked inside, you also mentioned something prior, that you've seen something in there. Can you tell us what you've seen that was really disturbing?
What do you mean, like the
tell us what
panels?
you saw when you looked inside. Did you look inside?
Yes, I could see inside in
and
the
what
front
was it
because
you
the
seen?
windows were big. I saw a control panel.
Okay, you've seen what appears to be a control panel.
Right, and it followed the panel itself was like like a table panel. It followed the curve of the spaceship, so it went from like one end to around the other end. It had buttons of so many buttons of different colors. There was like the greens and whites, and there was yellows, and they weren't like really bright, but there was only one very vivid red one, and it stood higher than the other ones, and that one was more close to me. And that was real noticeable because it was bigger, red, bright.
Did you see
higher.
any creatures, any beings, any motion, whatever?
Well, before I never mentioned that I did see its face because in my mind it was like I was told I wasn't supposed to reveal this, so for years I would not say what it looked like, and I had told you that I didn't, but I did see what he looked like. I saw what he looked like before he made the turn into the empty field next to me.
And how would you describe that?
He was skinny. He was at the control panel, and not the middle control or anything, but the one side to me where the big red buttons were closer to me, to the right-hand side. And he was skinny. He was skinny and looked long, and his face was dark red in his face. He had, I've always looked at it as his face is melting, because first off, he had like these, I wouldn't call them horns, but they're like a growth coming out, and then they taper off. I always said they kind of look like, what would you call, membrane, or, kind of like a...
Like a membrane or something?
Membrane, yeah. And there was a couple, and he had, above him, he had 3 folds of skin. But these were not dark red. These were gray, and they were cracked up, on them. They had like little, like they were dry or something, it was all cracked skin or something. And,
Maybe he's like one of the older ones or something, like a real old one.
I don't know. And underneath, he had the same 3 folds down here, but it seemed like it was dragging his eyes down, it was, and that also was gray.
He had a small mouth. And he had on a, looked like a suit, and that was red, except he had a shiny goldish rectangle, but it was like an upside down, you know, where it went this way and then down this way.
Triangle, rectangle.
Right, and it was shiny.
A triangle or a rectangle?
A triangle.
It was upside down?
Yeah, where it was wider on top and then it went down.
Oh, I see. So like an inverted pyramid or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Vera.
And it was shiny.
Okay.
You know.
Now, what other characteristics did you see of him?
Well, later.
Or it?
Of it? Okay, when it made the turn and everything, I ran back to his house, and all of a sudden the alien was not sitting in the seat, but it was there. The ship was right there, and him and I both stood there watching it. And we were just watching it. We decided to get his parents, and we ran back in the house, and they were sitting in the kitchen with just a light over the sink, and they refused to move. We kept telling them, come out and see this. You got to see this. And they stayed plant right where they're at and said no.
Did you find that unusual?
Yeah, we couldn't understand why they wouldn't come out. So, you know, we're okay. And we ran back out. It was a summer night, so you would think there was people around. You would think. There was no night sounds, nothing. It was like complete silence. My brother ceased to call me. There was nobody walking around. There was nobody out. No cars. No nothing. No sound. It was like you're in a bubble. And I could see the house across from the lot. And the people were in the kitchen right there. There's a picture window in the dining, and they're in there. One's doing the dishes, the mom's doing the dishes, the dad's sitting at the table, and they're carrying on like it's normal. And all I kept thinking is, there's a light shining on your house.
Okay, this light. What kind of lights were shining?
Right, there was different color lights.
Okay, give me an idea of, describe them.
Well, they would go into sequence.
Okay.
They never shine, you know, it was red, then came the green, then came the bright white light. And the bright white light is what really showed up the whole ship itself. That was the brightest.
Now, getting back to this creature, what was its next, what did it do after it?
After a long time of standing there, and I had the feeling we were being watched, you know, you could feel that. All of a sudden, it had its hand was like this. So the middle finger was long, but these were long.
And how many digits did you see?
I only saw what looked like maybe 4. It was kind of like a claw. This was in here. And the fingers were extremely long and slender. And so was the arm. It was dark red. There was no fingernails or anything. They were pointed, though. They were pointed. And the arm was really, really long and dark red, and it glowed. It had like a glowing look to it. Underneath it was a web. And the web was jagged all the way under its arms to about as far as I could see, a little bit up, maybe halfway past the
webbing? Now, was the webbing like that of, what would you describe the webbing?
Well, it was the same color as the skin, except at the end it was jagged.
Okay.
And that was like a brown, you know, it looked like
darker.
It was burnt, you know, it was dark. And inside of the web was little circles, some big, some smaller, and that in around the circles was a dark color. Like
clearly a type of, do you feel it's a membrane, or was it its clothes? You felt it was part of the animal or the creature itself?
Yes, I firmly believe it was a membrane. And it was sleeveless. Its uniform or whatever was the same color as its skin, but it seemed like it had like a little rim right here, It was,
Near
you know,
shoulder,
so
there was
there
something.
was nothing
Okay.
on the arms.
So how long do you think the two of you watched this?
Had to be quite a long time because I didn't get in the house until 11 o'clock.
So from the time your brother called you to the time you got in was how long would you say?
From 7, probably from, well, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock until 11.
So somewhere's between 3 and 4 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Which I didn't realize until I got in the house.
And what happened when you got in the house?
It was like my brother was oblivious. He's just laying there on the couch watching TV, laughing at some program, and he just turned and looked at me and went back to the TV as if there was no missing time, no nothing. It was just
Now, do you feel
weird.
the time of your observation and the time that elapsed were relevant? In other words, did it seem like it'd take that much time?
No, that's why it was confusing. When I came and I saw it was 11, it almost seemed like it was just a short time. You know what I mean? Like a half hour or something.
So what had happened then? What was the result of it? You watched it, you see this this thing reach out, and what does it do?
It presses the red button, the one that stood out the most. It pressed it down, and when it pressed it, it jerked its hand back real fast.
Then what happened?
And then the craft started to move very, very slowly, and there was wood trees in the distance, and it just kind of went there. And the last I saw was the white light, the bright white light, and it was gone. Didn't see anything else.
Ever since then, did you have any other experiences?
I've saw such as what? I mean, I've had
let's
saw
say
a few.
some. Do you have any unusual sleep patterns? Did you have any anything that?
Well, I know that I can't wear watches. Okay, it's one thing. I cannot wear watches. They go out within, several days. They won't work. I had several health problems that went away that shouldn't. I had lupus. I no longer have lupus. I had rheumatoid arthritis. I don't have that. I had just like really weird things that happened to me. And I developed a growth on the back of my foot that was supposed, you only get on your hand. So, I went to a doctor about it, and he goes, in my 35 years, I've never seen this before. It suddenly disappeared on its own. It wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to have an operation. I don't know. It went away.
Wow.
And just different weird things,
Great. Now, has there been a history of anything like this in your family, your mother, your father?
Yeah, my dad, he was a air traffic controller for the Air Force, and he also flew C-130s and traveled a lot to different, bases and different things. And while he was air traffic controller, he had one instance where a cigar-shaped object came on the runway and just hovered there. It was large, and it just hovered there. And he was watching it from the tower. And there was a couple other guys, and then suddenly it moved real slow, and he said, disappeared so quick, just shot up, and it was gone. And he's in the Project Blue Book. And he was flying one time a C-130 in an orange unidentified flying object, was riding alongside of the plane and then just completely flew over.
Do you know if that was the case that's in Blue Book or the other?
That I don't know.
One of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was in Florida in the Air Force Base there in Key West. And he observed one coming out of the water, just shot up out of the water and was hovering around for a while and then shot back down. And he saw that twice.
So your family's had it. Now, did he tell you this prior to this experience or afterwards?
No, beforehand. He told me that, he told my mother, when I was there, he said something strange happened to him last night, and it was a cigar-shaped one and stuff. later, after my experience, and much later actually, because, God, I would have to say years later, because my dad was been in the Air Force for 36 years. And later, he told me about, I must have been a teenager, maybe I was 17, 18 years old or something. He started talking about things that he had seen. But he had seen those, most of the sightings that he had seen were much later, you know what I mean? They were like in the 70s, you know, that he had seen them, stuff like that.
Wow.
So it was much later that he had seen I would say probably in the 70s is when he saw the ones in the water and the ones by the, when he was flying the C-130, and those incidents were in the 70s that he had seen those.
Great. Well, Kathleen, I want to thank you very much for your witness accounts, and if you can recall anything else further down the line, we'll be in touch. This is Sam Maranto, and here we are at Orland Park at the MUFON event, and we'll be right back to Threshold.
TheEdgeOnAir.com and Thresholds into Other Realms present Thresholds Radio, a weekly show dedicated to all things paranormal. Join your hosts Sam Maranto, John Stevenson, and Anthony Kopp Fridays from 10 to 11 p.m. for an expedition beyond your most unexplainable dreams. With new guests every week, Thresholds Radio will bend your views on reality. That's Friday nights 10 to 11 on TheEdgeOnAir.com. For more info on Thresholds Radio, visit UFO-info.com.
You're listening to Thresholds into the Realms. I'm Anthony K. With me is Sam Maranto and John Stevenson. And right now we have Richard Dolan calling in.
One day past the celebrated 64th anniversary of Kenneth Arnold, by the way. And
right.
Here we are, 64 years and one day into it. And tomorrow and the next day, somewhere's in that range, they started using the term flying saucer. Now, the question that was brought forth by Dan over here, was that term ever used before?
I do not believe so. It was coined.
Yep.
And it was coined at that time by the media. When Arnold saw these discs when he was flying looking for reward money. There was a downed aircraft, military transport aircraft, that had gone down in these mountains in the state of Washington. And he saw these 9 objects that he said were skipping along. They were like moving like up and down slightly, undulating, I guess. And the way he described it when he talked with the media was like saucers skipping on the water. So it was from that description that the phrase flying saucers came from. I can't believe, I'm not aware of any instance in which that was used prior to June 1947. If someone knows of it, I'd love to hear of it, but I don't think that's the case.
Do you think there was possibly beforehand, or no?
Just in some of the writings of Charles Ford, the Fordian Society, I'm sure it sounds awfully familiar. I mean, flying discs, flying saucers, something like that. I mean,
okay.
Going back to the Romans, they were saying a flying shield,
oh,
flying
yeah.
wheels. The concept's been there.
Right.
There are all kinds of flying objects that have been described in different terms. I'm just not aware of flying saucer prior to June 1947 with Arnold. But if the Fordians, if there's something in Ford's writings, I've got those here. I just didn't. I've never stumbled across that.
We have so many people still hanging on to it, and some in the field, which I find truly annoying, that hold on to the 1947 date, that this all took place in 1947. And, you know, right. They really need to get a serious reality check on this stuff. What's your take?
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. There's a long history going back hundreds and thousands of years, apparently thousands of years. It sure looks like it to me. But even in our own, in the 20th century, I was going to say our own century. It hasn't been our own century for 11 years. In the 20th century, there were very, very good sightings that we know for sure took place well before Kenneth Arnold. Even in the 1950s, it became obvious that there were UFO sightings during World War II, and everyone knows that this is the case. The Foo Fighters, and the question is who was building those. You get a large argument today that that's a Nazi design in Germans. I don't believe for a minute that the Germans were solely responsible for all of those sightings. I just don't. I do think that they were working on some advanced designs and saucer-shaped objects. We know that they were, in fact. But here's the thing. For example, a few years ago, I was in the Canadian National Archives looking at Canadian reports. This is in Ottawa. And I need to publish an article on what I'm about to tell you here, but what happened in the 70s and 1980s is Canadian citizens would write their UFO reports to their government. It would go to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who in turn would then forward it to a particular office in Canada called the National Research Council, the NRC. The NRC was composed of a couple of scientists working for the government who had no interest in UFOs at all. They handled it out of just sheer obligation. They were embarrassed by UFO reports. They didn't analyze anything. They just collected all these good Canadian citizens writing out these detailed things of what they saw, thinking the government's going to look at it. All that happened is it went into a filing cabinet and no one looked at it. However, those files are available. And so I was going through them. And in addition to getting current reports that people would say, there were a lot of older individuals who would write back early reports of what they'd experienced in the 40s and 30s and so on. I read an account from an elderly gentleman writing in the early 1980s. I'm sure he's not alive now. This man had been a surveyor assigned Canadian Northwest Territory in 1936. Now, the Northwest Territory, if you look at a map, it is huge. Northwest Territory is enormous, and today its population is very low. It's got about 40,000 people total. Considering an area that's about the size of Alaska or larger, got 40,000 people. It's basically nothing, and it's all concentrated in one or two towns. In 1936, the population was 1/4 of that. It was about 10,000 people. So you have this huge remote expanse with practically nobody there. So this guy, his job, along with some of his colleagues, was to do surveying. Essentially, Canada needed to find out what they had up there. So he's out in the middle of this small lake. So he's on the lake in his little boat, perfectly blue sky, and he writes, says, here's what happened to me. For some reason, there was no one around me. I had this urge to look straight up. And in the perfectly blue sky, he says, there is this beautiful object. It's perfectly round. Everything about this just seemed authentic to me. So he looks up. He sees this perfectly round object. He couldn't tell how high it was because there was no clouds. There's nothing to gauge the altitude. But he said, I saw it rotate, very, very, totally silent. And then after about a second or two, it just went zoom off into the horizon. He said it reached the edge of the horizon in about a second or two. It was absolute instant acceleration and utterly silent. And he blew him away, of course. So that's 1936 in the Northwest Territory. And I would simply ask anyone who wants to explain all of these UFOs, these early ones, as German technology, Nazi technology, there is, even if you go into the works of Joe Farrell, who's written about this more than anyone,
right?
There is no indication at all.
No, but he's got them. He's got the Nazis. Well, the Nazis and the Romans were working on something, and I think the Pharaoh Ananakin was working on something with the Nazis, and doesn't he have that going on too? I mean, we have accounts going back then, so the Nazis must have been pretty damn busy with their time traveling,
Well, I don't know. I'm not really giving a lot of credence to claims of time travel.
I would say the credence is zero, and the problem here is we have accounts that go, I got my elbow on Wonders in the Sky by Jacques Vallée, and I think it's a great book, and Chris Aubeck too. I keep on forgetting Chris. Chris has a great archive of all this information, and no, the bottom line is these accounts go back, and this new mythology is coming up that the Nazis, and of course the newest boot on this is the new book out on Area 51, right?
Jacobson's book, yes,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And she argues, if anyone hasn't heard it, that she has a source that was inside Groom Lake. No reason to doubt that she had this source that told her that the Roswell event was that the two main people behind it were Joseph Stalin and Joseph Mengele. Now, that's an interesting juxtaposition. Of course, Mengele was a Nazi scientist. But after the war, it is true that the Soviets got their own share of those German scientists. Just as we Americans did, so did the Soviets. Mengele was believed to have gone to South America, but according to this theory, Mengele was working for the Soviets using humans that had been experimented on that looked utterly deformed, hence the alien angle of it, okay? And then the disc-shaped, the source that told Annie Jacobson this said that he had heard that Stalin did this as a psychological operation against America. Honestly, what it seems like is that itself was a cover story within the classified world. If this guy told her this, and if he believed it, the only conclusion I would say is that he was fed someone else's disinformation. Because the fact is, when you look at the evidence that we have, there's vastly too much to show that this is something that was otherworldly. That's my own opinion. I think Roswell was an event that involved non-human beings that crashed, just like we think it did.
The scenario with the thing is, we're probably getting 5 or 6 different people talking about the Nazi UFO scenario and the Nazi Roswell scenario. Nick Redford's talking about them too, correct?
Right. Nick Redford wrote a book called Body Snatchers in the Desert.
And supposedly they were Japanese in this instance, right?
He argued. He said he had a couple of sources. He believed. He said that told him that the event was done with Japanese who were brought over to America and employed their knowledge of essentially the same thing that Mengele is now being said to have done. That is experimenting on human beings. You get short human beings to start with. You experiment on them and put them in these tiny little craft that went down. And that would be certainly that's an atrocity. So if it were found out, we would be the world would be absolutely furious.
And now now they have these sophisticated devices, the sophisticated crap that they allow these teenage mutant Chinese, Japanese, Ninja Turtles, whatever. They have them flying these crafts around, and of course, we have these mutants. And this makes all the sense in the world that you have this highly sophisticated technology that you're just going to crash, and you're going to go, ooh, boo, scare them, scare
absolutely.
These people.
Think about it.
Now this
think
is
of the top pilots of the 40s and 50s. Guys like Chuck Yeager.
Right.
Okay. And the astronauts, people like Gordon Cooper, who later went outer space, and all these other guys of the 40s and 50s were top guns, just like in the movie.
Right.
These guys were the best. And when you're flying high performance experimental vehicles, exactly, Sam. But how much sense does it make that you're going to put an untrained, presumably person who's been deformed in one way or another, and you're going to have them run this new cutting-edge technology? It doesn't make any sense at all defies any kind of logic.
Well, if somebody decided to do that to me, mutilate me, deform me, I'd take it and fly it up their keister. I wouldn't fly it to the United States, Yeah. Right?
Well, I think... And I like Nick Redfern. I have a lot of respect for him. I think...
I've lost a lot of respect on this one because it's really, to the point of I just got to write something. Well, go get a crayon, go to the bathroom and draw on the wall. If you got to write, do something, damn it. But don't put a bunch of disinformation out there. Pardon me?
He had a few sources, and he felt that it was good enough to put out as a theory. The thing is, he backed away from it very quickly, at least when I talked to him about it.
Yeah,
and I think that he caught so much hell for this.
Well, I just know one thing.
I think he overreached.
Well, here, who's in the camp on this Nazi stuff? Name the names. Who's the perpetrators these days on this? Who are bringing this new?
Well, certainly Joe Farrell.
Joe Farrell,
who
yes.
I understand is now leaning more toward an ET reality than he had in the past, incidentally. But I haven't spoken directly to him. I chatted with Richard Hoagland about this.
Mm-hmm.
Hoagland's very close with Farrell, and don't quote me on this, but I have the idea that Richard Hoagland himself might be sympathetic to the idea of Nazi UFOs in World War II and immediately after.
Well, I think a lot of...
May work on Mars, but doesn't really do a lot with the UFO phenomenon if you really look.
Right. Now, the other thing is, what is it, New Swaziland? What was it,
Neuschwabenland. New Schwabenland. That's in Antarctica.
And that's where we carried on the war with the Nazis, down in Antarctica. And that was in, what year was that?
Well, that's, this is all very interesting stuff. You're talking about the Robert Byrd mission in early 1947, a few months before Roswell.
Right before Roswell, Admiral Byrd goes down there, and 49. Operation High Jump was 49? You sure?
I'm going to look on my thing here. I was pretty sure it was before Roswell.
Really?
High Jump.
49?
I'm going to look here.
Operation High Jump. What year was that?
1947.
1947?
47.
Okay.
I'm looking at the wiki entry.
Okay. There may have been a follow-up to that in 49.
There was, in the late 50s, there was the International Geophysical Year.
Yeah, that was 1949.
But no, Richard Byrd, not Robert, Richard Byrd led the expedition. Now, the thing was, it was in January. It started in 1946, actually, August of 46. They get to the Antarctica, in like January, February. It ended in late February 47, which was 6 months earlier than they planned. And the thing was, the wiki entry on this is so bare bones. But there were men that were lost, even officially speaking. You had blizzards, and one of the aircraft that were out that way crashed in a blizzard. Okay, so the thing is, there was a news article.
Right.
And this is true. This is with a Chilean journalist that Richard Byrd was quoted by. And the article, the Spanish language article, exists. It's an easy search. You can find this, in which he does say, this is a paraphrase, but there are powers on Earth that are significant, and that can go from pole to pole. All right, and basically the thing was, if you really read this carefully, I'm wondering if this is in the wiki article. This is in the Wikipedia article too. The March 5th, 1947 edition of the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio reads, this is a translation, Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned today that the United States should adopt measures of protection against the possibility of an invasion of the country by hostile planes coming from the polar regions. The Admiral explained that he was not trying to scare anyone, but the cruel reality is that in the case of a new war, the U.S. could be attacked by planes flying over one or both poles. This statement was made as part of a recapitulation of his own polar experience in an exclusive interview. Talking about the recently completed expedition, Byrd said that the most important result of his observations is the potential effect that they have in relation to the security of the United States. The fantastic speed with which the world is shrinking, recalled the Admiral, is one of the most important lessons learned during his recent Antarctic exploration. He says, I have to warn my compatriots that the time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our isolation and rely on the certainty that the distances, the oceans, and the poles were a guarantee of safety. Now,
very interesting.
It is interesting. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to relate.
Did you hear that, folks? Did you understand?
It's not hard to see the connection there.
Right. I mean, it wasn't so blatantly obvious that there was lederhosen laying out on the, being dragged around by penguins, bratwursts, or they were hearing, echoes of Beethoven being played, but there was something going on down there that really scared them. Now, didn't he even ask for reinforcement?
Let me follow up with this.
Okay.
We always hear about how high jump ended in a rapid, let's get the hell out of here.
Right.
This is something that I actually didn't know, and I'm glad that you asked me about this. After the operation ended, a follow-up Operation Windmill returned to the area in order to provide ground truthing to the aerial photography of high jump. So in other words, they brought people right back there. And then there was a gentleman named Finn Rohn, R-O-N-N-E, also financed a private operation to the same territory until 1948. So, you have to ask yourself if high jump was a great failure, what's going on with this follow-up expedition that follows right onto it?
But where is the German or Nazi tie-in? Is there anything German or Nazi? I mean, I'm looking for
during the 30s and apparently into World War II, the Germans did claim that area as theirs. So
yes,
they
did.
Mm-hmm. Neue Schwabenland, New Swabia, basically. And there's some pretty good research done on this. Farrell really, I think, does the best work to show that they were interested. They did have a couple of expeditions there. And so that's basically it. You don't really have a whole lot. But they were interested. And we also know that at the end of World War II, we know better now than we ever knew that the Germans, many of the leading Nazis, were very successfully spirited out of Germany in the closing months of the war, the closing weeks of the war. Most famously, we learned about a decade ago of Hans Kammler, who was written about by Nick Cook, a UK aerospace writer. And Kammler has been written about a lot by Farrell and by Jim Mars. Hans Kammler ran for the SS all of their black budget research and development programs, the whole thing. Really, what we now have in the U.S. is all this black budget, these operations, a lot of it was pioneered by Kammler for the Germans, for the SS during World War II. And one of the things that they did work on were disc-shaped objects. Victor Schauberger, who is very well known regarding all of this, his work was taken over by the SS. They forced him to work for them during the war. And a lot of other things, most famously what they call Die Glocke, or the bell.
The bell, yeah.
According to Nick Cook, it did appear to him that this could have been true, that there were German scientists working on this intense electromagnetic device,
right,
that somehow brewed around with time and space in ways, and killed people, by the way. It was a very dangerous device. And according to the legend, all of those scientists were assassinated. About 60 of them were lined up and shot in the very final weeks of the war so that they wouldn't be able to talk about this. Well, Kammler knew about all of it, and Kammler disappeared. And he was gone. And it is believed that he continued to live and worked in connection with CIA and U.S. intelligence.
Now, the funny thing is, you mentioned the time space. Well, here, when we have any gravitational deviations, what happens is time-space is affected. That's factual. Now, the other thing is when you're talking about the bell, the Kecksburg case comes up to mind, and many people here probably know the Kecksburg case. It's a very, very renowned case. And,
right.
Of course, Leslie Kane and Stan Gordon, a few other folks have worked on this. And what's your take? Do you think there is any correlation? Is it possible? I mean, of course, it's always possible. But where does your, as far as Kecksburg, is it the bell? Is it a similar technology? Is it ours? Is it? I mean,
well, the problem with the Kecksburg object as a bell, it seems to me, is that the German bell was not an aerial object. It wasn't meant to fly. That wasn't its purpose. So, in the history of UFO literature, you get kind of bell-shaped objects that have periodically been described. Or in the case of Kecksburg, the most common word you hear is acorn-shaped.
Right. And we get egg-shaped cases all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, Stan Gordon does not believe in the bell theory regarding Kecksburg. He dismissed it. He said, no way, absolutely not. I don't know. I mean, the real question regarding the Kecksburg object is, was it man-made or artificial? Was it natural or artificial? And I think it was artificial. So if it's artificial, is it something we made or something that we didn't make?
Right.
Either way, of interest to me, and I think to anyone investigating this, a lot of these UFOs, it's hard to know at this point who's making what. By the mid-'60s, my opinion now about that is that we were just getting the capability to make what would be genuine UFOs, very possibly as early as the mid-'60s.
I think it was 1958, and that's the year I'll hold on to as far as from my research, yes. So
it could be.
Yeah, I think.
In fact,
so we're both.
I have a quiet source that said as much to me as well. That the 1950s were the key decade for breakthroughs.
Yes.
On this, so I don't have specifics. Certainly, I think by the mid-'60s we were making them. There's a shot of a UFO near the town of Provo, Utah. That's not far from Dugway Proving Ground. 1965, and it's a classic, absolutely beautiful shot of UFO. It was taken by an Air Force pilot. It's a good photo, and I think it's legitimate. And my own opinion is that that's probably something we made. It has a human manufactured look to it, in my opinion. So I think that we were making them. And then when you look at some of the other rumors, Project Red Light and the rumors from people like not just Lazar but Bill. Other people from Groom Lake who worked in the 70s and in the 60s who have detailed statements to make lead me to believe that we might have made breakthroughs by the 60s, maybe earlier.
Now here's something, a little diversion. Somebody brought up underground bases, and we're going to be jumping around a little bit, Rich, if you don't mind. Underground bases, I had mentioned that Richard Sauter is having his books published through your publishing company. And a gentleman here has some questions pertaining to that, if you don't mind, okay?
Not at all.
Okay, Richard, good morning. And I wonder, what is the status of confirming this idea not only of the unusual alien military underground bases, but also this nationwide network of supposed maglev trains that spirit people around from one major city to another? Do we have any credible people who have come forward on this, or any way of confirming except indirectly through the literature?
I think the latter is really what we have, in my opinion. I have not found what I would consider to be really strong confirmation that this is real. What Richard Sauter did, I think very well actually, is he constructed a hypothesis. Maybe he made it sound more like a confirmed theory, but I think he put this out as a theory, as a hypothesis, which is based on three things. One, known plans by U.S. military to go deep underground and deep under the ocean floor that did exist in the 1960s. That's 40 plus years ago. That indicated it was absolutely no problem for them to go that deep. The U.S. Navy, for example, had explicit plans to go under the ocean floors, to have permanent under-ocean bases. By the mid-late 1960s, they were planning this out, and they commissioned a Navy illustrator to draw the whole scenario for them. And Richard was lucky, and he became friends with this illustrator, who gave him all of the illustrations and the work and described the Navy's attitude about this. By the way, there was no confirmation from this man that the Navy followed through with those plans. He said that's not something that they would have told me anyway. But they did have the plans. The other thing that he describes is the technology and the research. By even the middle of the 20th century, there were some extremely sophisticated studies done on underground type tube systems for transport. One of the people who worked on this was the rocket pioneer Robert Goddard. Shortly before he died, this became his primary scientific interest. He died in the late 40s. And Goddard patented, in fact, a couple of these underground high-speed, very high-speed tunnel systems. We're talking 400 or 500 miles per hour or faster, according to what he believed. There's another scientist by the name of Salter, I believe. This is all in Richard's book, who worked as well for the JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab. He was an expert on gravity assists of objects in orbit. He applied some of his expertise to this idea of a high-speed underground maglev system. And that was in the 60s and 70s. What Sauter argues then is that the plans were there to have tunnels. The technology was absolutely there. And then the third leg of his argument are leaks. Some of them are privately published leaks, and others that were privately given to him directly, that he sort of gathered together. And based on those, it became his opinion that there is a lot going on beneath our feet. None of that would count as confirmation. What would confirmation be? Seems to me, short of going in with a camcorder and then coming out and convincing people that it's legitimate or getting some kind of official government acknowledgement, it's going to be very difficult. What we have right now, though, officially speaking, we do know that there are large facilities that are underground, and our government will admit to a lot of these. Mount Weather in West Virginia has a large underground facility that's government operated, and we know all about it. And there's a lot of others that we know about. What he argues is that he strongly believes that there's lots of labyrinthian connecting tunnels that connect them. And we don't have confirmation of that. There are just claims. All there are claims. So-called whistleblowers. Everyone can be a whistleblower now, and they don't have to provide any proof of what they do. I would like to see someone who can confirm their military background or confirm their national security bona fides, who is then willing to talk. And to my knowledge, we don't really have anyone who's got the credentials and is willing to give explicit information. That's a true whistleblower.
Hi, Richard. My name is Ross Curley. My mainstay is Mars Anomaly Research, but the question...
Ross, we're Facebook friends, I believe.
Yes, we are.
Okay, how are you?
I'm just fine, thank you. Have you ever personally met any of the German rocket scientists that came to the United States?
No. I think they're all gone.
No, there's still one left. He's about 90 years old, and I'm working on trying to get in contact with him.
Fascinating. Well, they're certainly worth talking to if you're able to establish a communication with this person. I think that would be very, very valuable.
I met a friend of my nephew's down in Dallas last year, and I was talking with this lady on the 4th of July, and she mentioned to me that I was telling her about my Mars experiences, and she mentioned to me, she says, well, my grandfather was a German rocket scientist, and after the war he came to the United States and went to work for NASA, for the space agency.
Right.
He has retired from. So I'm trying to find out exactly who he is.
Yeah.
And when I
well,
do, I will send
did you say your Mars experiences, or did I mishear you?
Yeah, not Mars experiences. I do Mars research for Andrew
Oh,
of Chicago. Okay. I'm sure you know Andrew, right?
Never been to Mars, right?
I've never been to Mars, no.
Well, I don't know Andrew Basiago personally. I've corresponded with him, and we've got mutual friends, and he has made this claim. He's made a lot of claims.
Right.
And I have no problem saying right here that I'm skeptical of some of the things that he says. I'm skeptical of a lot of what he says.
Right. But you'll be in December. You'll be in Louisville, right?
Yes.
Okay. We'll all be there. So will Andrew. So we'll get to talk to him face to face.
Yeah, I will appreciate that. As I say, he's struck me as a nice man. On the other hand, there was a claim that came out a couple of months ago on Facebook. Everything's on Facebook now. That allegedly one of his close friends, who had no idea that Andrew was making these claims, that Andrew had been using him for technical knowledge to use this guy to sort of buttress his own statements with technical, technical language, and that the friend finally learned out and became very upset about that. Okay.
Yeah. Richard, I have a question about the supposed meeting that President Eisenhower had in February 20th of 1952, Muroc, California.
You mean 54? 1954?
54.
I think that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, so when he disappeared for 2 days and supposedly met with extraterrestrials.
Right, that was in 50. They say it was in 54, right.
Okay, well, what's your opinion about that? Do you think our government or some portion of our government signed a treaty with extraterrestrials?
Honestly, I think it's possible. Here's why I think it's possible. Eisenhower did disappear. It was very dodgy, as the Brits would say. Goes off and disappears for a couple of days. He's over at Edwards Air Force Base, which is a very good meeting place for all of us. The rumors came out almost immediately, by the way, about this. This is not something that just took years and years and years. It was reported within a couple of weeks. Somehow it had gotten to the radio journalist Frank Edwards, who was something like the Art Bell of his day, in the sense that Edwards had millions of listeners and was willing to talk about, among other things, flying saucers, UFOs. And Edwards had heard about this and reported it, that this alleged meeting that the president had had with aliens. I mean, it was sensationalistic. And, of course, Edwards was the mainstream just smacked that story right down. But it did come out immediately. There's a couple of sources. There's a few people. There's a letter from a fellow Gerald Light, who claimed that he was there. He didn't see the ETs, but he described what was going on, that he had learned at this meeting, that they had spoken with Eisenhower. And then more recently, golly, I need to really firm up on this, but I met personally a man who had been at Edwards in 1954, low-level, private, grunt kind of soldier, I guess, who was there, did confirm the president arrived, discussed all the security that was there, and said that there was talk of a UFO that was there. So there were these rumors. If nothing else, there seems to be something that started the rumor right away about this meeting. So I don't know. I think it's actually possible. Why wouldn't it be? If you have other beings that are interacting with humanity on Earth, would they at some point have a meeting with the U.S. president? Well, sure, I don't see that as outrageous.
Hey, Richard, you've actually got a Brit here, so I can relate to what you just said. Good morning.
Cool.
My name's Des, and I do have a question. Right at the beginning of the show, you were mentioning Operation High Jump. Could you just briefly explain what that is, please?
Yes, I will gladly. The explanation of what high jump was organized by the U.S. Navy, I think, and the idea was to establish an Antarctic research base. They were going to call it Little America. And there are some other stated objectives to it. Train personnel and testing in cold conditions, to basically own the largest part of the Antarctic continent that you could do anything with. Because it jutted out. That part of the continent juts out and is more practical to work with than other areas of Antarctica, from what I understand. And then it was really an exploration thing to discover how feasible it would be to have bases in the Antarctic and so on. This is the official explanation. Again, you could look for all of this right on the Wikipedia entry for high jump. Now, the question, I guess, would arise is there a covert element to the high jump mission, which would be to deal with the alleged Nazi presence that was there? And that's something that I just don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions?
Richard, my name is Jim Wolford. What is the status of determining who the nurse Naomi Maria Self was, and what became of this person from the Roswell incident?
Yeah, right. The story was that Glenn Dennis, who was the mortician, or one of the morticians in Roswell, was, I guess, dating this nurse, Naomi Self, right? And that she was...
In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaney received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Señoras y caballeros, bienvenido al 2009 Expo Political Conferencia en Barcelona, España. Ahora, por favor, bienvenido a nuestro huésped especial, Dr. Stephen Greer.
Domo arigato, Barcelona, Spain. It's me, Doctor. That's right, USA. Okay, settle. It's me, Dr. Stephen Greer. And I once sent a carrier pigeon to the Clinton White House to inform them that if they don't disclose what they know soon, I'm gonna. Didn't hear back. But something like 8 or 12 or something years later, whatever it was, another man, a more open man, took to the White House, and his name was President Obama. Yeah, that's right, you can applaud that. So, I got a message to Obama. Got it to his CIA director. I won't read the whole thing to you now, but they've read it. Actually, how I got it to them was I got my grandkids to go to the same school as his kids, and I passed a message through class. I believe it was a math class. Will you give this to your dad, yes or no? And his daughter, one of his daughters, not going to say which one, circled yes. And P.S., Jimmy likes you, that kind of thing. Kids are cute. Anyway, and so then she passed the legislative bill that I am demanding he pass regarding disclosure to Obama's daughter. Not going to say which one. Wouldn't be appropriate. And one can only assume that Obama passed it on to his CIA director. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Dr. Stephen Greer, and that's me, how is it that you're a grandfather? I mean, you're so virile and young looking. And I know, I mean, I get that all the time, and I thank you for noticing, but we're not really here to talk about that so much as disclosure and free energy and aliens and what I know that you don't know, that the government knows. Somehow I know the same things that the government knows, and I can threaten the government with my own disclosure if they don't disclose, which is kind of weird, because you would think that if I really wanted disclosure and I knew all that stuff, I would just disclose it myself irregardless. That's right, you'd think that, but you'd be wrong.
Jeremy.
Jeff, shut up, man. Greer.
What?
Greer's on in Barcelona.
For the love of God. Let's go. What the hell are you watching that crap for?
Because it's Greer in Barcelona. What part of that doesn't excite you?
The part after,
Wow. It's going well. What do we have on the show today? Maggie Jackson?
Are you interested in the show, maybe? I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I was, until Greer came on, and, yeah, you know, he's got a lot to say. He's gonna
Jeremy?
talk to Obama and the aliens.
Off the
What?
TV. Turn off the TV.
Fine. Sorry. Guess I just got
Distracted.
Oh, Paratopians, have we got something special for you? My goodness. Some shows, you know, when they do the shows about the future, they go to psychics, maybe they turn to remote viewers, perhaps they crack open a prophecy or two. Biblical, maybe. Nostradamus, yes. And sometimes Edgar Casey. But what do? Well, we scour the earth, searching for somebody smart, for somebody together, for somebody award-winning, for somebody who just takes a look around her environment and sees what's going on and extrapolates from there. That's right. We've got Maggie Jackson, an award-winning author and journalist who writes the popular Balancing Acts column in the Boston Globe. Her work has also appeared on National Public Radio and in the New York Times, among other national publications. Her acclaimed first book, What's Happening to Home? Balancing Work, Life, and Refuge in the Information Age, examined the loss of home as a refuge. That's right. I'm reading all of that from the inside flap of Distracted, The Erosion of Attention in the Coming Dark Age. That's her latest book. It is in hardcover currently. You can get it anywhere you like. And soon it will be in paperback. We'll get to all of that by the end of the show. For now, please welcome. I am excited. I am thrilled. I can't do more intro for this. One Ms. Maggie Jackson. Maybe you can just tell us what the collective losses we experience for telling a dark age are, and we can just go down the list and kind of see where we're at. But first, why don't you tell us, what you mean by a dark age, and why you think we're heading toward one?
Sure. Great question. Those are two very gripping words, and they weren't thrown in the subtitle for no reason. I wasn't just trying to raise eyebrows there. I did quite a bit of research in writing my book about what constitutes a dark age, because actually what drew my curiosity was that I heard tremendously brilliant people from Harold Bloom to Umberto Eco and Jane Jacobs all call our current era a dark age of sorts. And people have very many different definitions of a dark age, but if you look at the history of, say, the Greek dark ages or the medieval period that we know well, even eras in Chinese history that were considered dark times, there are characteristics that parallel them all. And for instance, a dark age, well, what's surprising, first of all, is that a dark age is not necessarily all negative. Dark ages throughout history have been times of inventiveness, times when technology has flourished, although writing and literacy has fallen off or even disappeared altogether. In many ways, dark ages are not all a collection of subtractions, as Jane Jacobs said. But dark ages cumulatively are times of cultural forgetting. In other words, mankind, humankind, or a certain civilization in a certain period of time forgets how to build on the past, which of course is tremendously alarming and, it leads to a lot, many backward trends, again, both in the culture and in society. Jane Jacobs thought that our current age was darkening because cultural institutions, she felt, were crumbling. For instance, ethics in the business world and in science, family life, and she didn't mean just traditional family. She meant, the institutions that sort of were the frameworks for intimacy and connectivity. So those were her ideas of a dark age. And I saw in my work on research, as I was investigating the role of technology in our life and the rise of an inattentive, distracted society, I felt that there are a tremendous number of reasons why I'd say we're headed toward a dark age unless we truly act, in particular, to cultivate attention again. I mean, at the moment, a doctor interrupts a patient on average after just 18 seconds. Children, half or more of children 6 and under, no, 2/3 of children 6 or under live in American homes where the TV is on most of the time, which is actually an atmosphere, an environment linked to attentional difficulties. And then we face a tremendous fragility of digital data. People know about this a little bit, but I don't think very many people know that our past is at great risk of absolutely disappearing for all sorts of complex technological reasons. The machinery itself is, constantly being updated, and also digital data is fragile in and of itself. So for these variety of reasons, I'd say that we're at risk of creating a culture that's based on new forms of ignorance. Literacy is going down, social disconnection, people relying on shallow forms of thinking, and then the specter of a literal cultural forgetting, simply because we can't preserve the past as well as we should. So all of these sort of pieces of evidence led me to believe, I would argue very strongly, that we do face a dark age. That doesn't mean I'm pessimistic about the future, because I think if we act and if we are able to, use our tools differently and educate our children differently, et cetera, I think that there's a lot that can be done to avert this dark age.
You think, or do you think that maybe a dark age is sort of a recalibration and getting used to the new age?
Well, we're certainly in a transitional time when it comes to technology. We're at a crossroads in terms of the future of what it means to be human, especially as artificial intelligence, increasingly nears surpassing the human brain. I mean, we're at a crossroads in a transitional age. We're at a really tremendously a time of tremendous change thanks to technology. And maybe there are recalibrations. Certainly, complex civilizations, when complex civilizations have crumbled, from the Mayans to, various civilizations, there's been a time of retrenchment and simplicity. I mean, maybe in some ways this recession heralds that period of time. So a dark age is often followed by a renaissance. Maybe this isn't, again, a negative in more ways than one, but, there's a lot of, pain and darkness and again, disconnection and unnecessary, sort of shallow thinking in this period of time, this type of era, that we can avert if we really wake up and become more aware of how of what's going on.
And I guess just for you personally, to have written this book, which came first, the notion that we were heading toward a dark age, or the looking around yourself and then figuring that out? I mean, did you have some sort of notion that we were heading toward a dark age and wanted to write a book about it, or did you just?
No, I was very concerned about our use of technology. That was my starting point. I really thought by looking back in history and understanding some of the first high-tech revolutions, the invention of the cinema, the phonograph, the telegraph, etc. By looking back into past periods of time, I would gain clues about how we, particularly Americans, could use our gadgets better. That was the starting point for my book. So I was concerned. I thought that people were becoming highly connected and yet so deeply disconnected as human beings. What some scientists have told me is the growth of an autistic society. I was really deeply concerned with, how Americans were defining efficiency and productivity in the most shallow surface ways, et cetera, et cetera. But in going back in history and researching the technological issues, I began to see that really the core issue before us was attention and how humans use their attention. Now, that was one strain of my research. At the same time, I was curious because I heard of, the great thinkers calling this a dark age. And also I was curious about what an age is, what characterizes a turning point in civilization. We called this, or we still call it, the information age. We say it's the digital age. Well, what does that mean when we kind of bandy about that term? So that's how I began. So I had several, seemingly separate strands of research that I was burrowing into, and then they really all, in some ways, fit together. I mean, in many ways, fit together into this book about attention and distraction.
Yeah, well, what does that mean to you that this, whoever the gurus of public persuasion are, decided to call this the information age and not the wisdom age? To me, that implies a sort of a shallow collection of data, perhaps for consumer purposes.
Well, in a sense, it's the terminology, the information age, is entirely appropriate because I see that we do have gluts of data and tsunamis of information, but yet we're having difficulty individually and collectively turning that information into knowledge, and that there's the rub. I think that it's really easy to depend on what's first up on Google, on the surface of the web, to depend on short sound bites, or Twitter facts and tweets and things like that. It's so easy, and humans have always pursued the easy road in many, many ways. I mean, that's part of, I guess, our makeup, that we, take the easy road as long as we're surviving. So, but yet, to move past data and information into knowledge and then ultimately wisdom is difficult, and I don't think we're really living up to the task. We're not really we're not really exhibiting as a culture perseverance and will and discipline and doubt and uncertainty. We're relying on, as I've been saying, shallow thinking, black and white thinking, and kind of the easy way out. So the information age is a perfect description in many ways of what we're mired in.
And is that just an American phenomenon, or do you think it's global? The internet's global.
Oh, I think it's becoming. I mean, my book is based on U.S. research, but I was very intrigued because when the book came out last summer, the response internationally was phenomenal. I mean, the press from almost every continent interviews, emails from people all over the world, 15-year-old Irish kid or, people in Korea and et cetera. So I think that while the details of the phenomenon are different in each culture, Koreans might be affected differently by all of these technological and other changes than people in Bogota. But I think that the core issues are spreading, at least in the developed world.
And are the collective losses universal, or are they specific to America as well?
Well, again, I haven't done research in, Europe or America, but from what I hear anecdotally, and people are worried about connection and not only family life, but how their kids are connecting socially, how they're spending their time. People are very worried about whether or not the deeper, difficult questions are being answered and worked on in workplaces. Whether or not the average worker now switches tasks every 3 minutes, the average information age worker, and that finding has been replicated in study after study. So, are people engaging? Are they critical thinking, doing critical thinking? And this kind of interrupt-driven, multitasking, hyper kind of work is correlated with a lack of creativity. That's another set of studies out of Harvard Business School. So when people feel scattered, as most people do today at work, they're actually less creative by their own report and by their supervisors. So I think that these losses are not just American. I mean, maybe Americans are at the forefront, or people in the United States, I should say, not to lump Canada in there, but people in the United States are perhaps at the forefront of feeling these changes because we are a historically restless nation, immigrants, pioneers, go-getters, business people. That's sort of a simplistic summation of the roots of American culture. Hence, we are restless, somewhat attention deficient, some people say, and we're very, very enamored of technology. I mean, I think we as a culture, more than many cultures, adopt technologies willy-nilly and over, kind of almost abuse them. We allow the technologies to control us rather than vice versa, I'd say.
Do you factor in things like, education and the underfunding of the arts in schools?
Well, it's not a specific, that's not specific to my book. And I'm not sure what your question, exactly
we're talking about a culture that's, not deep.
Right.
If you take away the arts and art funding and things like that, I mean, there are certain, just political things in the equation. I think that could be reenacted, might get people thinking again in better ways.
Well, certainly removing the arts or recess, or giving kindergartners sheets and sheets of dittoed homework every night. All of those are indicative of a culture that thinks in the short term. And when you look at the way most people operate, head down, nose down, in the BlackBerry, in the gadget, running around, switching tasks, jumping from thing to thing. Cognitively, it's really hard to gain perspective. Physiologically, biologically, your attention networks. I mean, we haven't really talked about what attention is, but attention is a multifaceted set of networks that's actually an organ system. Attention is akin to your circulatory or your digestion or your digestive system, in that many different parts of the brain and body have to operate together to perform the feat of attention. And so, and there are number of different types of attention. There's focus, which is orienting, that's the spotlight of your mind. There's awareness or alerting, that's wakefulness or sensitivity to your surroundings. And then there's finally executive attention, which is planning and judgment and what you need to envision, your agenda or your goals for the next hour or the next week or your whole life. And if you think about this scattershot, fragmented, diffused environment that we're placing ourselves in and our children in, it's both common sense and it's also, biologically true that you just can't engage with something. Your brain isn't going to go deeply. And that's tremendously frightening for a country.
Are there repercussions for the brain?
Well, I don't think we know what we might need to know about, whether or not, in other words, are we rewiring the brain by being a distracted culture? Well, this much we know. The brain is highly plastic. From cradle to grave, you can grow new neurons or brain cells. The brain can mend. You can actually change a brain, say the brain of a dyslexic or depressed person. This was unheard of. No one would have believed you 10 years ago if you'd said this. But we can actually change the brain, and we do, in fact, every day. Our habits and our environment shape us. So therefore, a child, say I mentioned background TV and attentional difficulties. When the TV is blaring all day long, no one's even watching it, whether or not it's a kids program or the news, just that noise in the environment makes kids play more briefly with their toys, hop from toy to toy, show attention deficits. And so therefore that child is being shaped by the environment that's around them. Their attention is being shaped. And on the flip side, you can meditate and actually in a few short weeks strengthen your neural pathways related to attention. So, the training, the shaping of the brain can go either way, for good or for ill. So it's really quite astonishing to think about what we're doing by working distractedly, by relating distractedly, by being in these noisy, rushed environments. I think that, we certainly don't need to live like monks, still and meditating all day and et cetera, but we need to balance ourselves so that we have times for stillness or teach children both as role models and literally teach them how to focus, how to stick with something tenaciously, focus on a problem, go deeply. So this is really exciting what we can be doing, and it's really depressing what we're not.
Well, before we get to the ray of hope at the end, of course, because in America we like to have the happy end. Let's go down the list of what you call the collective losses that foretell a dark age. What are they, and let's find out where we are on that list.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we can talk about sort of twofold losses in many ways. I mean, first of all, the social. I don't think I expected to write a book about social relations again when I started to delve into this topic. But of course, if you think about it, attention is the stepping stone to relations. Even in, sociologically, if a person is not attending to another, well, then their relationship isn't getting off the ground right then and there. And autistic people have a tremendous difficulty, or they can't sometimes attend to social cues. So therefore, again, the language of relations is diminished enormously. So attention is really crucial for relationships. And I think that, this is one of the potential losses, or one of the losses that we're facing right now, when we are not only depending on the thinnest, most faceless means of communication media ever invented for a growing proportion of our relationships, even with our most intimate friends, family, etc., then we really should pause and give pause and reconsider. This sort of pattern of I was just listening to a YouTube lecture by Neil Postman, the great social critic out of NYU, and in the late 90s he was talking about some predictions that man would talk more to machines than to each other in a certain future period of time. And yes, I mean, voila. In some ways, yes, we're talking to each other through the machines, but in some ways we're talking to the machines. I was in a hospital outside Boston writing a journalism piece about the hospital, and I noticed everywhere there were, of course, laptops to take down data. But I asked one of the nurses, isn't it sort of sad that there's always a machine between you and the patient? And she immediately reacted. I was wondering whether she'd even understand my question or think along those lines. And she was really kind of upset about the fact that there was always a machine physically between the patient and the caregiver, so to speak. There's increasingly a machine between the student and teachers of our world, although many teachers are fighting against this. So the social relations, I'd say that's one of the big costs of our current. And then I also like to add that it's not just the machinery, it's also the breadth, the networks that we're able to communicate with. The technologies sort of jack us into this incredible networks of connections. One sociologist looked at the 5-year email archive of a 24-year-old in Boston and just counted up and saw that he was connected, if you include the group emails, to 11.7 million people in the world. So, goodbye village life, hello global village. But in that case, it's not a zero sum, but the breadth of relations does trump the depth of relations. You just simply don't have time when you're keeping up with that many people to go deeply into any one of those. And there's a whole lot of research that backs up that statement. So the social is something that concerns me enormously. Again, our autistic society. And then secondly, of course, there's the cognitive cost of, again, in some ways it's a matter of breadth, not depth. I mean, we have access to so much information at our fingertips, endless amounts of information through Google and whatnot. But again, are we kind of taking that information and able to go deeply? 40% of college graduates in the United States can't read a food label proficiently. They don't really actually understand a food label, and that's up from 30% in the early 1990s. On tests, there's a new national test, a kind of SAT of information literacy given to college students now, and on that test, just 50% of college students can judge the objectivity of a website. So they're absolutely, kind of suckers for, the misinformation, disinformation on the web when they can't judge whether it's an objective site, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really at what I think is a crisis of learning or cognition, because we might be faced with a totally new form of ignorance, and that is ignorance in the past was always based on lack of information, almost always. Now we might be faced with an ignorance born of a lack of willingness or inability to make use of the information that's all around us. And so that's kind of a scary proposition.
Yeah, and somewhere in there, I wanted to give this example. I have a friend who, I had asked him face to face, what did you think of this movie, whatever it was, Knowing, I think it was. And he said, I wrote a review of it on my blog. I said, oh, all right, well, what did you think of it? Like, well, I wrote about it. You can read it there. It's like, it wasn't like he was trying to be snobby. It just did not compute to him, no pun intended, that you could have this face-to-face conversation about something he'd written on his blog.
Wow.
It's just like, wow, this is where we are, really.
Right, and actually when blogging just started, I'll probably guesstimate wrong, but, when it was really rising 4 or 5 years ago, I immediately saw it as the symptom of one thing, a lack of listening in our culture. I think that people blog when they're not listened to in the rest of their lives. Now, that doesn't mean blogging isn't useful. It doesn't mean that some bloggers are phenomenal. It doesn't mean that we don't need new forms of journalism. It just seems to me to speak of, blogging is a monologue. Yes, you can have comments at the bottom, but it's still asynchronous and mostly a monologue and often a diatribe, but it's not a dialogue. And as you're saying, it's not a conversation. So, again, is this wrong or right? Or some people might applaud all of these changes, but I think that we're truly diminishing humanity when we can't face one another. And when do we need to face one another more and get through the awkwardness or the discomfort or the difficulty or the miscommunications? When do we need that more? Well, now when we're living in the era of the most crowded planet ever. So much of the difficulties that we face are demographic increasingly. The crowded planet is really the bottom line on Earth, and whether it's to do with education and the environment or developing nations, et cetera. And so we certainly need to be able to focus and understand each other more, not less.
So, and on that note, one of your collective losses is trust. A little bit about that. You get into surveillance, and how that's really making us less trustful of each other. This monitoring each other.
Yes, and it's interesting. I must have done hundreds of interviews, written and podcasts and radio, and it's remarkable to me, actually. It's sort of interesting and intriguing to me how few people ever ask me about that chapter of my book, which is, as you were saying, about surveillance and trust. I think it's so discomforting that people don't even want to really talk about it. One of the losses, as you're saying, in this darkening or distracted age is trust. And I was intrigued I was trying to look at attention from so many different points of view and 360-degree look at attention. And so I started to look at hyperattention. Surveillance. The surveillance society, especially in the Bush administration, was really an astonishing depiction or illustration of hyperattention, not inattention. And this surveillance society has been, I think, unconsciously in many ways carried into the home. So that I'm not saying there's a direct cause and effect, but at the same time as we were creating this surveillance society, we were also creating surveillance families where particularly parents are increasingly watching and monitoring their children. And people put black boxes in kids' cars when they're teenagers that monitor when exactly they brake, at which intersections, how fast they're going, how fast they take turns, when they, exit off, et cetera, et cetera. They're actually software programs that parents buy, and in which the school sends a readout of every single calorie a kid consumed at lunch. Every potato chip, chocolate chip cookie, French fries, et cetera, is beamed back to the parents through the software, and it's very popular nationwide. Private detectives report that kids are being monitored. So kids are being watched and watched from the get-go in their lives. But what is the cost? Well, trust is really the cost, because any time you're watching and spying on a kid or anyone, you're basically saying you don't trust them. Now, parents say, "Oh, we don't trust everybody else in the world. I'm just trying to keep my child safe. I'm just trying to get peace of mind about my child." But it's, frankly, they're also saying, whether they like it or not, they don't trust their child. And so much of this surveillance is. And so it's really interesting to think about the nature of trust. Well, trust is a risk-taking. And why is it in this anxious world, when we seek to control our children's lives and we seek to control so much, neurotically, compulsively, we seek to control so much of our own little tiny environment because we feel so frightened about the big environment. That's when we feel like we can't take risks. And, it strikes me as very reflective or sort of a echo of past societies, say even pre-Middle Ages, when people were very tribal and they were highly suspicious and they had extraordinary mythologies to explain now what we learn from science. And so this kind of surveillance and this sort of loss of trust, I think it is just another outcome of the social costs that I was talking about in a dark age.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw the head of Homeland Security on the Bill Maher show, on Correct, and Bill Maher, of course, is a liberal, smarmy guy, and so it surprised me when he let this go. When he'd said something to the effect of basically the Obama administration wants to do with Homeland Security is almost turn it into like a community service. Like they really want to get the message out there that everyone's in this together, that we should all be surveilling each other. Since the National Guard is overseas and the Army is overseas, we should really sort of hunker down and not feel bad, I guess, about it. I mean, it really sounded like, are you kidding me? And it reminds me, I live in New York and we have this subway ad campaign of you see something, say something.
Right.
And nobody really wants to tell you what that something is.
Right.
But they're all trying to couch it in these nice community terms, as if this is some community building experience. And I don't know. It just it reminds me that when we had all of this as a science fiction, and you would think about the future in these sort of Orwellian terms, you never really thought that like the public would go along with it, right? I mean, there was always just sort of either the future was this way and there was no how did it get this way, or it was that people struggled against it, but there was some oppressive force that made it this way. But it seems that we kind of want this, and I guess that's sort of what's scaring me.
Well, exactly.
Any words of wisdom for me so I can sleep at night?
Well, I think that's what Huxley or Orwell saw all along. I mean, they were so brilliant, so perceptive that they really saw how both in totalitarian societies and then in sort of more subtle societies of control, that human beings would kind of go along with it. And so I think that it's really hard for people to see the big picture, especially in a time of flux and a time of transition. So it's really very, very difficult to see technologies impact on our lives, for instance, when they're very, 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 very new. I used to joke when I talk to different groups about how no one in Radio Shack takes you when you go to buy a cell phone, it's just a simple materialistic transaction. But really, someone should take you behind the scenes in Radio Shack and give you counseling and ask you, do you really realize how much this thing is going to change your life? It's a lot more complex than you might think. So it's really difficult to see the horizon, see the forest for the trees, etc.
Mm-hmm. Your book is really great to me in that pretty much every page there's always at least like one or two sentences that could go on a calendar. That sort of encapsulize everything. And here's one of them. We need to consider what kind of literacy we will forge for a society awash in words, and yet increasingly lacking in higher forms of attention that form the bedrock of reading. I wrote it out, so I'm squinting at my own handwriting here. So what kind of literacy will we have when we're awash in words, but we don't have any access to deep meaning? Are we literalists? Are we fundamentalists at that point?
Well, that's a stupendously huge question. But I think when people are literate and yet they're not able to go beyond the surface meaning of, say, the text, I think you'll find people who are less and less able to understand nuance. You'll see increasingly black and white thinkers. People whose level of public debate is really low. As we've seen in the presidential debates, increasingly, there's very little actual give and take. There's more just sort of chanting mantras and hoping the public swallows it. That kind of thing. And the presidential debates have been really incredibly horrible, I think. So I think that, this is what happens. And then if you go even further, think about the loss of imagination, think about the loss of possible an inner life, attention. Without attention, children can't develop a conscience, because you have to pay attention not only to, say, the physical act of stealing the cookie from the cookie